Well, thank you guys so much for having me. It is cool to be here. It's neat to be in California. You know, the rest of the country is like a frozen ice cube. You know this? Okay? I come from New England, where it has been so cold that the Democrats have their hands in their own pockets. Just to give you an idea of that. I'm called the free market warrior because I travel all over the United States, literally all over the United States. In a month, I'm going to be in Maine. And I talk to people, I help people understand free market economics, because I think this is at the root of so much that's wrong with our country today, is that we don't understand the basic principles of how free markets work, how America got to be the richest country in the world to begin with. Don't you think understanding that, might help to get us back there again? So that's what I do. I have, as Aaron mentioned, a seminar, which it's a two-night program. It's about 7 hours. We do 2 nights, and it's about understanding the basics of economics. It's called economic literacy, and the whole idea is to help people get the whole picture of what a free market is, what it does, why socialism can't work even on its own terms. Even if you accept every single thing the socialists say, it still doesn't work, because they don't understand how an economy works. And you will if you give me 2 nights, and I would love. So my #1 goal in coming here this evening is to encourage you guys to invite me back to do the whole seminar, okay? And I'm going to be back, I'll even tell you when. I'm going to be back in June, and I think the second half of June, I'm going to be in Northern California. So I would love to do that. It's called economic literacy, and I've done it 250 times in 24 states, all over the country, and I would love to do it here for you guys also. So what I was going to do today, because obviously we don't have as much time, is talk about a little piece of economics. I was going to talk about money. Money is something that comes into everybody's life, and yet it's frequently misunderstood. People live with money, but people don't understand money. And one of the most common fallacies is that people think that money is wealth. Wealth is money. This guy over here is wealthy. How do I know that? He's got a big pile of money. So he's a wealthy guy, because money is wealth and wealth is money. And yet, it's not true. Money is not wealth. It's an important distinction. Money is a tool we use to measure wealth, but it's not wealth. And if you don't believe that, if you were shipwrecked, on a desert island like Robinson Crusoe, and I came along and dumped I flew over in my helicopter and I dropped $1 million on you, you'd be annoyed. Would you not? What are you going to do? You'd be happier if I gave you a pizza. Okay, what are you going to do with the money? Because money's not wealth. Money measures wealth if you've already got the wealth. But if you don't have any wealth, money's not doing anything, because it's a tool that measures wealth. It's kind of like a clock measures time, right? But a clock is not the same thing as time. Is a clock time? No, a clock measures time. If I bend back the arm of the clock, do I give myself more time? I break the clock. If I leave the clock alone, it measures time. If I mess with it, it doesn't do anything. Now, this point is very relevant to what's going on in our country today. What I try to do is help people understand the economics behind the policies. And the fact is that the official economic policy of the U.S. government for the last 80 years has been based on the writings of an economic quack named John Maynard Keynes, who said that if you're in a recession, you could fix it by dumping money around. See, we're going back to the same point, okay? That money is what's going to fix the economy. So the government takes a big bucket full of money and dumps it into the economy. We call this a stimulus, do we not? And that's going to get your economy going again, and that's going to fix everything. We've been following this for 80 years now, and I want to talk about it. The first question, just on the simplest level that comes to me, is where's the government getting the money from to dump into the economy? You got to look not just where it ends, but where it comes from. And there's only 3 places that the government gets money. They can tax it, or they can borrow it, or they can print it. If you know any others, you let me know. Okay? So it's you're taxing, you're borrowing, printing. Well, taxing doesn't make any sense. If I tax your money away from you, and then I give it back to you, are you stimulated? Okay? I could have just left you alone. And in fairness, this is not what Keynes says. Keynes does not say to tax people more. Keynes says to tax people less. His followers have forgotten this. But he says cut taxes and raise spending. You want to spend more and tax less because the secret to prosperity, says John Maynard Keynes, is deficits. Deficits, he says, are good. Deficits are the secret to fixing the economy, and the bigger the deficit, the better. You just can't get it big enough. I was listening on Fox News, literally driving here today. I was listening on Fox News, and they were talking at the 5th-year anniversary of Obama's stimulus. And one of their liberal Democratic commentators said, well, the stimulus didn't work because it wasn't big enough, which is the standard party line. And it's a great line because, it never works, and it always was because it wasn't big enough. You can play that game forever. So that's what they say. The bigger the deficit, the better. Because we're going to stimulate the economy with borrowed money. If we borrow the money, we don't have to take it out of the economy. We're just putting it into the economy, see? Because it's borrowed. And then the problem with that is, where are you borrowing it from? The planet Neptune? Where is this borrowed money coming from? It's being borrowed from the economy, is it not? Every dollar borrowed must be lent. Must it not? Every dollar lent must be borrowed. Dollars borrowed and dollars lent in the world must be exactly the same. How could they be different? Okay, the reason we have borrowing and lending is that there are some people in the world who have more money than they want to spend right now. And there's other people who want to spend money they don't have right now. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have borrowing and lending, okay? So what happens? The people who want to spend money they don't have go to the people who have money they don't want to spend, and they borrow it. That's why we have borrowing and lending. Now, usually there's a bank in between, but the bank is just a broker. The bank's a middleman. The guy who wants to spend money he doesn't have borrows it from the guy who has money he doesn't want to spend. And if the government borrows money, obviously there's less money for other people to borrow. Is that not obvious? Okay? You are taking it out of the economy. You're just taking it out of the credit markets instead of out of the tax rolls. But it's the same thing. So it's just wrong. And the third thing you can do is you can print it. And Keynes recommends both. He says borrowing and printing are both good. He calls one a monetary stimulus and the other one a fiscal stimulus. But he says they're both good. And of course, the problem with printing money is that you devalue the money. Right? If you make more of anything, you're going to decrease its value. And if not, I run into people who don't believe that. I don't know what to say to them. If you can print more money and not decrease its value, why do we do anything else? We should just print money all day long. Why do we put counterfeiters in jail? We ought to give them a medal, okay, for stimulating the economy, okay, because they're creating more wealth over there, isn't it, making everybody richer? Okay, so if you make more of something, you decrease its value. Now, I didn't bring this with me today. When I do my seminar, I usually bring my $100 trillion bill. Have you guys seen those? They're from Zimbabwe. Okay, and in Zimbabwe, they have a 100 trillion with a T dollar bill, and that will buy you a Pepsi. That's what you put into the soda machine to get a 12-ounce can of soda. 100 trillion. And people say, well, it's crazy. Who would make an economy like that, 100 trillion to buy a can of soda? Well, it didn't start out that way. They used to have real money in Zimbabwe, but the government of Zimbabwe had a policy that they would run out of money and they'd print more. And if you keep doing that, that's how they paid their bills. They printed more money and spent it. And if you do that, you end up destroying the value of your money. What does the U.S. government do when it runs out of money? It prints more. By the way, if you think we're borrowing the deficit from China, you are years behind the time. We stopped borrowing years ago. We are printing it all. 100% of the deficit is printed monopoly money with the ink still wet. Okay, that's how we're paying for our country, just like Zimbabwe. Oh, we're a little more sophisticated. We got a building in Washington called the Treasury. You know what they do with the Treasury? They print bonds. They print Treasury bonds. The Treasury is a printing press that prints bonds. Then there's another building called the Fed. You know what they do at the Fed? They print money. What does the Fed do with the money they print? They buy the bonds. So the bonds go from the Treasury to the Fed, and the money goes from the Fed to the Treasury. You see how much more sophisticated we are than Zimbabwe. We're way ahead of that. We got two whole buildings throwing pieces of paper at each other, and that's how we pay for our country. So you may recall, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago, the government of Cyprus announced that they were going to confiscate 10% of everybody's bank account. You have a bank account in Cyprus, too bad luck on you, you just lost 10% of it. Do you remember that? Now, I remember it really well because for a month straight, every talk I gave, every place I went, I was asked the same question first. Will the U.S. government do that to us? Are they going to come along and confiscate 10% of our bank account? And it's an awesome question, and the answer is no. The U.S. government will not be confiscating 10% of your bank account. I promise. You know why? Because they don't have to. They've got a much easier way of doing it. They can print their own money. Why would they take your money out of the bank when they can take the value out of the money via dilution? Okay? See, I don't know, has anyone here saved up 100 trillion yet? You know, for retirement? Well, let's imagine you got 100 trillion in the bank, and when it comes time to withdraw it, you find out that's enough to buy a Pepsi. You are going to feel like you've been robbed. And the bank's going to say, what are you talking about? It's all counted again. Every penny is right there. And they're right, it's there, but the value is gone. They don't have, the U.S. government does not have to take the money out of the bank because they can take the value out of the money and just print their own money. If you had a printing press in your basement where you could print your own money, would you rob a bank? No one would rob a bank if you could print your own money. Robbing a bank is dangerous. You could get shot. You could get arrested. Okay, all kinds of bad stuff could happen to you. If you could print your own money, why would you rob a bank? And that's how the U.S. government feels. In Cyprus, they're on the euro. The government of Cyprus has no power to print money. The U.S. government can. That's the difference, okay? They are going to rob you via dilution, not confiscation. Okay, so that's the problem when you print money, and so we've had this idea, and we've had 14 presidents by my count, from Herbert Hoover to Barack Obama. How many of those 14 do you think believed in Keynesian economics? The answer is 13 out of 14. In the last 80 years, every single U.S. president but one was essentially a Keynesian. That is, say, believing that you could fix an economy by having the government spew out enough money. Okay, so I want to go a little deeper into this. I want you to know what Keynes says. This is important, not because he's right, he's dead wrong. But this is what the leaders of our country for your entire life have believed. Keynes says that the reason you get into a recession is that there's too much supply and not enough demand. Too much stuff, not enough demand for the stuff. And it doesn't mean like there's too many tennis rackets, not enough tennis players. You say there's too much of everything. Aggregate demand, there's too much of everything, not enough demand for anything. And so the factories lay off the workers. They don't need workers because there's too much stuff. Why should I pay you to make more stuff if I can't sell the stuff I got? So go home, I'm not paying you anymore. And now the workers don't have a job, they don't have a paycheck, and so demand falls even lower. And Keynes says, see, you're in a trap. Okay, because the demands are going even lower now. Now, you might think that the solution to the problem is to get the workers back to their old jobs at the factory. If the workers went back to work at the factory and earned money, the whole economy would start turning again. But Keynes says no. He says that's not the solution. He says, sure, that'll increase demand, but it will also increase supply, because they'll be making stuff. He says if your problem is that supply and demand, this is his whole theory, that supply and demand are out of whack, if you raise them both, they're still out of whack. He says that's no good. We have to get these people jobs where they don't produce anything. That's what Keynes says. So that way there'll be more demand and not more supply, and that'll fix the problem. Okay, but where do you find a job like that? Who's going to pay you to not produce anything at all? You guys have read Keynes's book. I can tell. You're way ahead of me. That's exactly what he says. He says give them jobs in the government, and then they'll be consuming and not producing. That will fix our economy. Okay? And I want you to understand, if that's the case, there's no such thing as efficiency. Because the whole point is for them to produce nothing. That's the goal. If the government hires them to dig a hole in the ground and then fill it in with the same dirt, perfect. That's the perfect job, says Keynes. They're producing absolutely nothing. It's like they were never bored, except they're consuming stuff, and that'll get our economy going. Yeah. So, well, something needs to be shoveled. I'll tell you that much. And so, first thing you need to know about Keynes is that deficits are good. The second thing you need to know about Keynes is that waste is good. Wasting money is good. That's the cure, he says. What's next? Destruction. Destruction is good, says Keynes. Okay? How many of you guys were taught in school, as I was, that World War II stimulated the economy? Weren't you taught that? Yeah, because all that destruction. You blow stuff up, and then you have to hire people to rebuild it, and that'll get the economy stimulated. And I was like, if that's it, why doesn't Obama just call out the Air Force and bomb like Los Angeles? Okay, nobody has. My friends were in church. Okay, just keep that in mind. Nobody has to get hurt. Okay, you could evacuate all the people from Los Angeles. They come up to here to Reading. You could put them up for a few weeks. Okay, and then we carpet bomb. We turn Los Angeles into a pile of rubble, and then every unemployed person in America could be hired to rebuild it. We would take unemployment to zero. We'd have full employment. Wouldn't that be great for the economy? The only problem I could think of is after a couple of years of building, they would be done. Los Angeles would be completely rebuilt, and you would have to lay them all off. But you know what the answer is then? You bomb it again. We could keep bombing and building and bombing and building. We'd have 100% employment. Except this is insane. And yet, this is what the U.S. government has been run on. I told you, 13 or 14 presidents. There are about there's about 1,600 major colleges and universities in the United States. How many do you think teach this stuff in their economics department? Virtually all. There's about 5 or 6 that don't. All the rest teach this. They teach this as absolute fact. They don't teach this as a theory. They teach this like they teach gravity. That this is just indisputable. This is the absolute final truth. Is Keynesian economics, and we see it everywhere in our discussion. Remember Cash for Clunkers? What was that about? You had to destroy your car so that we can buy a new car, and that'll stimulate the economy, right? But that doesn't make any sense. You could have had 2 cars. Now you've got one. Why do you have to destroy the first one to build the second one? How does destruction possibly make people wealthier? And yet that's what people believe. World War II stimulated the economy. This argument we're having now about unemployment insurance. Let's talk about that for a second. Why do we have unemployment insurance? Is it because we felt compassion for unemployed people and wanted to give them a helping hand? No. Unemployment insurance was invented by John Maynard Keynes with the express purpose of getting people to consume when they're not producing. That's the whole point of unemployment insurance. Remember when Nancy Pelosi said the best way to fix the economy is more unemployment insurance? That's what she's saying. She's saying that she's getting that straight from Keynes's book. Okay, that you pay people to produce nothing and they'll consume and that'll get the economy going again. That's the whole point of it. Okay, this latest bit about Obamacare is going to get 2 million people out of the workforce, and the Democrats are like, well, that'll be good. Okay, because they'll be free. They can pursue their dreams like sitting on the couch watching television. Okay, it's like I've always dreamt of sitting on the couch watching television, and now my dream has come true. Okay, this is all based on this idea that it's consuming is what's important and producing is bad. But it's all poppycock, is it not? There's many ways to demonstrate this. One of my favorite economic didactic techniques is the desert island. Something about desert islands, it's the air on a desert island clears your head and suddenly makes economics easy to understand. So if you want to understand economics, go to a desert island. I want you to take an imaginary trip with me. Look around you. Imagine that all of us are in a boat, okay? And the boat gets shipwrecked on a desert island. We have no radio. No one knows we're here. We could be stuck on this island, for all you know, for the rest of our lives. Just imagine that with me for a moment. Would it, just like Gilligan's Island, that's it. Would it not be immediately obvious to every single one of us that the way to succeed, the way to get the highest standard of living possible on this island, would be for every single one of us to produce? Would that not just be obvious? You wouldn't even have to say it. It's obvious. We would probably have a division of labor, okay? Because different people are better at some things and other people are better at other things, okay? People are different, so we have a division of labor. So we would probably send some people into the woods to go get animals that we could eat. We'd probably have people catching fish, people picking berries, people building huts, people mending clothes. We'd figure out who was best at what, and we'd do different things, and we'd probably exchange with each other. Does that not make sense? If I caught a fish and you pick some berries, we could trade off, and we'd both have a more balanced meal. I'd get some berries and you get some fish, or we could help each other building huts. Now, let's imagine that I was there and I said, well, I'm a Keynesian. So I'm not going to produce anything, but by consuming, I'm going to stimulate you to produce more. What do you think? Okay, so I'm going to produce nothing at all. Okay, I'm going to lie on the beach all day and get a suntan, but I'm going to eat twice as much every day as everyone else does. Okay, I'm going to get a double portion of dinner every night and produce absolutely nothing toward that. But all my consuming is going to really stimulate and really rev up your economy. What do you think? Let's imagine that you built a hut to shelter yourself from the rain, okay? So you could sleep at night and not get rained on. And I came along and I burned your hut to the ground. And I said, see, I've stimulated you. Okay, you thought you were going to be unemployed tomorrow. But now you've got a job tomorrow rebuilding the hut I just burned down. I think I'm going to find myself floating out to sea strapped to a coconut is what I think at the rate that I'm going, okay? I don't think anybody wants me on the desert island, but I want you to understand that Keynes or Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama would look at me and would say, no, he's the secret to your whole economy. It's his consuming all the time that's driving your economy. You can't lose him. This is craziness. And yet this is what we believe. Why are we getting poorer and poorer and poorer in this country? Because we've got fewer and fewer and fewer people producing anything. That's the problem. Because wealth is not money. Wealth is not jobs. Wealth is stuff. That's what wealth is. Wealth is the things that we have, the buildings, the automobiles, the computers, the telephones, the clothing. That's what wealth is. It's the stuff that we can get and we can produce and we can have access to. Money is a very useful tool. It helps keep track. In a big, complicated economy, it helps keep track of who does what for whom. It's useful, but only if you're producing something. Okay? To think that that's the goal. If we got shipwrecked on desert islands, the first thing you'd want to do is start printing money. Okay? Money is only useful if there's actually an economy there to keep track of. And the same thing with jobs. Jobs are only useful to the extent that they lead you to produce something. So what have we got in the United States today? We've got, 14, 16 million unemployed, like long-term unemployed, on unemployment insurance for years, and they're producing nothing. We've got millions, we've got 20 million Americans working for government at all levels, a few of whom are doing things that actually need to get done. Most are doing things that either don't need to be done at all, they produce nothing, or things that can be done far more efficiently if we're handled by the private sector. Okay? They're producing, most of them, nothing. In fact, many of them are negative producers. We actually have, the Department of Energy employs 9,000 people. What do they produce? No, well, that's wrong. Nothing is a compliment. Okay, you're overestimating their capacity. They are negative producers. Okay, we have less energy because we have a Department of Energy. If they would just go on strike and stop working, we'd all get richer. Okay, because we'd have more energy. They stop energy from coming to market. Okay, so this is what we've got in the government. So that's millions more. We've got millions more Americans who work in the private sector, but for jobs that only exist because of government. See, every time government regulates something, the companies have to hire people just to deal with the government. They're not producing anything. They're just playing this meaningless game back and forth. So I'll give you an example. The IRS employs 115,000 people to make sure that you pay enough taxes and that you don't get nonprofit status for your group. And so what do? You hire a tax accountant to protect yourself from the IRS agent. Now, is that tax accountant, is that a real job? No. And I want to be clear here, I'm not suggesting that accountants don't have real jobs. Accountants can be very useful. Anyone running a business would probably want to have an accountant to keep track of the money. That is a useful job. But this particular accountant is not helping anybody run a business. He's just wrestling with a 70,000 page tax code that we don't need to have. It does nothing for anybody. And so we're consuming, again, more vast quantities of labor wrestling back and forth a tax code, which is a completely artificial construct. Neither side of this is producing anything for anybody. What else have we got? We've got millions on welfare. Millions more if Obamacare fulfills its potential. We have millions of students staying in college into their 30s, getting graduate degrees in subjects like gender studies, gay and lesbian studies, Hispanic studies, African American studies, politicized identity politics that has nothing to do with anything that possibly relates to producing anything. What are you now qualified to produce now that you have a PhD in gay and lesbian studies? Nothing. Okay, and the point is not whether it's not that I dislike gay and lesbian people. Nothing of the sort. This is not a subject. This does not prepare you to participate in the economy in any possible way, shape, or form. Okay? That's the problem with it. And yet, this is what we're doing with the best and brightest minds in America, is we're taking them out of the economy. This is the problem. This is as clear as day. This is what's making us poorer. I had a guy who came up to me after one of my talks, and he said, well, I disagree with you. He said, I'm unemployed, and I really do need a job. And I said, okay, if you can't get a regular job, why don't you go down to the local hospital or the Red Cross or the animal shelter, volunteer. They won't turn you down, and then you'll have a job. And he looked at me for a moment and he said, well, that doesn't pay. So, well, we misunderstood each other. I thought you wanted a job. Now you're telling me you want money. Which is it? I mean, you want the job? Or if I offered you the job with no money, or the money with no job, which one would you take? And he said, I'll take the money. Well, there we go. So you don't have a job problem, you got a money problem. I said, but that's all right. I had my $100 trillion bill with me. So I said, listen, here's $100 trillion. Okay, so that'll solve your money problems. And he looked at me and he looked at it and he said, but I can't buy anything with that. Well, we've misunderstood each other again. Okay, you see, we thought you had a money problem, but you don't have a money problem either. You want stuff. That's what you want. You want gasoline to put in your car. You want food to put in your table. You want clothes to put in your back. You want a house to live in, furniture in the house, okay? That's what you need. Okay? Money and jobs are only useful to the extent that they lead us to producing the stuff that we want. On a desert island, this is crystal clear. Once we get into the large macroeconomy of the United States, we completely lose track of it. It's as simple as that, my friends. Okay? We need to get back to where we're. Now, in a free market, this happens automatically because nobody will pay anybody freely, voluntarily, with their own money to produce nothing. But once government gets involved, we end up with this diversion of economic resources to non-productive ends, and that, as simple as that, is the problem. Thank you guys so much. I would love to come back in June and do the whole thing with you.